Put yourself in this position. You're about 3/4 of the way through a multi-day tour overseas in Europe. You're leading a group of 12 bikes on an adventure bike tour through the Italian Alps. It's a drizzly, wet day. You come around a sweeping left-hand corner, third gear, doing about 40 kilometres an hour, not going too quick. You're about 1/4 of the way into the corner and you feel the front end of the motorcycle go out from underneath you and you start heading for the tarmac. Your body's heading for the ground. You hit the ground, you start sliding along the wet tarmac. You look ahead and you and the motorcycle are heading towards a steel Armco barrier on the outside of the left-hand corner. We're on the right-hand side of the road, so there's not much danger of sliding across into a car oncoming, but there is a steel Armco barrier coming towards you and the motorcycle. You think, when that bike's going to hit the barrier, it's probably going to bounce back towards me. So you start rotating around on your back so that your feet are towards the bike, so that when it springs back out of the Armco barrier, you can maybe push it away with your feet. You're sliding down the road, the bike hits the barrier, it hits first, it hits nose first, and it does exactly what you imagine it would, which is it springs back towards you. You give a little kick off with your feet, and now you find yourself sliding down the hill head first, like a little turtle on your back sliding down the road, and the bike's doing little pirouettes behind you. Then you think sliding down the head first backwards down the hill is not such a good thing, so you decide to roll over onto your stomach, get on your hands and knees while you're still sliding at about 20 kilometres an hour. At some point, surely this sliding's got to stop, and it does. You stop, you turn around, get up, and you wave like this. So that all the other group of bikes, the 11 other riders that are coming along down the road behind you, have maybe got a chance of not doing exactly the same thing that you just did. That's what happened to me about 2 years ago. June 2023, I was leading one of our machine tours through the Italian Alps. I was 3/4 of the way through the event. We only had a few days left, and we're up in the Dolomites, my favourite place in the world, and I had a little whoopsie on the tarmac. So today's day 6 of my 30-day challenge talking to camera, and the topic for tonight is my biggest mistake on an adventure ride. And that was probably the biggest mistake, and what did I learn from that one? The first thing I'd say is that I don't think I really did anything wrong. That might sound wrong to say that, but it was just one of those situations that just happens. I came into the corner, wasn't going overly quick. It had been raining all day. We'd been riding through all these twisty corners, just the same as this one, for hours on end. Wasn't tired, visibility was good. I wasn't trying to race anyone, just cruising through the corners, and I just stuffed up. The bike slipped out from underneath me. Not the abilities, your ambition exceeded the grip, but I didn't have enough grip for that given situation. To be honest, it did surprise me when I hit the ground and figured everything out. I was kind of surprised that I hit the deck. That's only the second time ever that I've crashed a motorcycle on bitumen. The only other time I've crashed a motorcycle on bitumen is when I was super motard racing. So that's on a dirt bike with street tyres on a track that's a mix between bitumen and dirt, and I was transitioning from the dirt section onto the tar and tucked the front end, second gear, low speed. So I could probably be forgiven for that in a racing situation. So this was, really my first proper crash off-road, on the bitumen. And the problem was that there's a lot of pressure on my shoulders, or a lot of expectation on me. Leading a tour group through a foreign country like that, I need to be at my best. I need to not be the one that stuffs up and makes mistakes. So that was a bit confronting for me. It was played with my mind a little bit, I'll confess. And it made me realise that being a tour leader, I have to be the one that everyone else can rely on. I shouldn't say it made me realise, I already knew that, but it helped to amplify or really impress on me the job that I've got to play when I'm at the front of the group and I'm leading everyone else around these corners. I'm the pathfinder, and I need to be the one that helps keep everyone else safe. So After we sort of settled everything, got everyone pulled over on the side of the road, I walked back up the road, and what I did find is that there was a pine tree that had been cut. It had obviously fallen across the road, and they'd cut that up at some point and taken all the debris away off the road. That was fine, there was no debris left there. The only thing I can imagine is there was maybe a bit of sap from the tree that had dropped on the road, but you couldn't detect it at all. Normally, if there's a bit of oil or something that had spilt on the road, you can normally see that shiny patch on the wet bitumen where the oil's glistening in the wetness. In this case, if there was any pine sap at all, if that was the issue, you certainly couldn't see it. And as I said, that corner was no different to the hundreds of others that would been around that day or for the weeks previous. So just one of those things that it happens. So although I wouldn't necessarily class it as a mistake in terms of, I don't feel like I could have done much different as a rider. Obviously going slower, maybe I would have had a chance of not sliding down the road, but I don't think I was going particularly quick for that situation. But I guess the experience that I got from that situation was, that took my motorcycle out of action. My Multistrada V4, sadly, the one that I was renting on that tour, is no more. I rode it off in that crash. That's the first time I've ever done that to a motorcycle, and it's not a nice feeling. When the bike was sliding down the bitumen and it nosed into the Armco barrier, I think the front wheel must have hit one of the vertical posts, destroyed the front wheel, and it also folded the forks back in towards the engine of the bike and basically snapped the fork leg. So that bike was toast. So we had quite a few things to deal with to manage to get out of that situation. The first thing that goes through my mind is, how am I going to lead the tour? How am I going to get the rest of the group back to Milan safely? I've taken the bike out of action. I was fine, thankfully, had all the right riding gear on, not a scratch on me. It was a very low speed crash, 40 odd kilometres an hour, and there wasn't a lot of friction being a wet road surface, so I was completely fine. The bike, on the other hand, was not fine. So we had a few logistical challenges to sort out there. First thing was to make the bike safe, get it off the road, get it out of everyone else's harm's way. We actually dragged it back up the road a little bit to a house that was just up there, knocked on the door. The guy didn't speak much English, we didn't speak much Italian, but we said to him, do you mind if we leave the motorcycle here? We'll sort it later. We did that. We then got everyone else together, and basically I commandeered Trudy's bike. So Trudy was at the back of the pack as sweep rider. Trudy, my wife, she was sweep rider on that European tour, and I commandeered her Multistrada V4 and she jumped on the back behind me. Better that I'm riding the bike because Trude's a little bit shorter in the legs, so better that I'm riding the motorcycle and she goes pillion. So we got everyone back to the hotel that night, safe, happy, all good. We then had that logistical challenge. We still had 3 days left on the tour, so the decision was made that I would ride Trudy's bike and Trudy would go pillion on the back of the bike for me. And we finished off the tour, frankly, in no big drama at all. The bike came and picked up by the rental company the next day, and it did a long trip back to Milan on the back of a tow truck. So that was not a good end for the motorcycle. We did, however, finish the tour off no problem. The silver lining, I would say, this whole big mistake that I made was that Trudy got some fantastic photos on the back of the bike for the next few days. So she was sitting pillion on the back of the bike with her iPhone out, taking some great photos. And she's got an absolute ripper of a photo, one of the ones that I love. She's just in behind me. You can see the back corner of my helmet with a nice POV view of the handlebars of the motorcycle and the Dolomite Mountains up in the distance towering above us. So there was a silver lining to that big mistake that I made. It all ended up pretty well, but in that sort of situation, you realise there's a lot of weight on my shoulders as a tour guide. I've got a lot of jobs I've got to do, and riding the motorcycle, thankfully, doesn't take a lot of brain input from me nowadays, that I can do a lot of things subconsciously or without a lot of conscious thought. But it just goes to show that it doesn't take much, split second, things can go wrong on motorcycles. If we'd been in a car with 4 wheels, wouldn't have slid off the road or anything like that. But when you're on a motorcycle and the contact patch with the road is about this big, the margin for error is very, very small. So we always need to ride with that good degree, that buffer in our riding abilities, so that if we haven't got the ideal road surface, we can perhaps manage it and get our way out of it without going sliding down the road. That was a big lesson for me. Frankly, it did affect me a few nights later. We got back to Milan, tour was finished. Earlier on in that tour, I'd had my daughter. At the time, she was 12 years old. I had her on the back of the bike with me a few times during that tour. Great experience for her. I loved having her on the back of the bike, but it did hit me that if that same thing had happened when I had my daughter on the back of the bike and we went for a slide down the road, it really affected me thinking about that. So, you know, that was probably the biggest lesson for me out of that one, making that mistake and thinking about if there's someone else involved, if I've got my wife or my daughter on the back of the bike, then I definitely ride with a much greater degree of self-preservation because I've got someone else's life in my hands there too. And that's really stuck with me, and I'll still go riding, same sort of pace that I do. As I said, I don't think I necessarily did anything wrong in terms of riding speed or anything like that day. But if there's somebody else on board with me, then for sure, I'm going to ride with a little greater degree of safety buffer. That's my lesson for day 6 out of this 30-day challenge talking to camera. We're nearly at the end of week 1.